Blood pooled on the metal decking as the alien queen collapsed into John Freeman's arms, her last desperate words fading away with her consciousness. The future of the human race now rested squarely on his shoulders. John was just a maintenance worker, a cog in the giant machine of the United Nations space station. He had never asked for this responsibility, never trained for it. But when the alarm started blaring and Empress Wezin of the Ferengi stumbled into his section demanding sanctuary, everything changed. The Empress had revealed a dire plot. Rogue elements within her own empire sought to overthrow her rule and use the chaos to conquer the Galactic Alliance, starting with Earth. She had narrowly escaped assassination, but her wounds were grave. If she died here, war would consume the galaxy. John made a split-second decision. He went against every protocol, every rule he'd ever known, and chose to hide Wezin. Using his intimate knowledge of the station's labyrinthine maintenance corridors, he evaded the assassins now swarming the station, getting Wezin to a hidden utility room where he could treat her injuries. But their safety was temporary at best. The Ferengi rebels were already targeting the station's defenses, determined to kill their empress at any cost. Chaos descended as the unfolding coup became clear to all aboard. John knew what he had to do: get Wezin off this crippled station and to the surface of Earth. Only then could humanity have a chance. An unlikely alliance between a lowly human and an alien queen, forged in blood and desperation, with the fate of galaxies hanging in the balance. The clock was ticking. John's heart pounded as he and Wezin crept through the dimly lit utility tunnels, the distant echoes of searching rebels spurring them onward. Wezin leaned heavily against him, her breaths ragged, but her eyes burned with fierce grit. John's mind raced, mapping out their route through the bowels of the station he knew so well. Suddenly, a shout rang out behind them. John spun, pushing Wezin behind him as a group of armed Ferengi rebels rounded the corner, weapons drawn. Instinct took over. John charged forward, a blur of motion as he disarmed the first rebel with a bone-crunching strike. He whirled, using the stolen blaster to drop two more before they could react. Plasma bolts sizzled past him as the remaining rebels opened fire. John ducked and rolled, coming up with a sharp uppercut that sent a rebel crashing into the bulkhead. Beside him, Wezin snapped off precise shots with a captured rifle, her aim deadly despite her injuries. In moments, the skirmish was over, the tunnel silent save for their heaving breaths. John knelt beside Wezin, checking her wounds with gentle fingers. She gritted her teeth, antennae quivering. "I'll live," she growled, "but we must hurry. I intercepted rebel comms. They have a warship en route to dock with the station." John nodded grimly, mind already racing ahead. "We need to get to the emergency shuttles. It's our only chance of reaching Earth." He helped Wezin to her feet, supporting her weight as they forged ahead. The shuttle bay doors loomed before them, tantalizingly close, when a searing plasma bolt exploded against the wall beside John's head. He spun to see Commander Zorgak striding towards them, face twisted in a vicious snarl, blaster leveled. "Your reign ends here, Wezin," Zorgak spat. "The true Ferengi Empire will rise from your ashes." John shoved Wezin behind a packing crate, plasma scorching the air where they'd stood moments before. He returned fire, the searing exchange of blaster bolts filling the bay with flickering light and acrid smoke. Zorgax advanced relentlessly, his armor absorbing John's shots. Thinking fast, John ripped a fuel line from the wall, spraying the flammable liquid towards Zorgax. "Wezin now!" he roared. Wezin surged from cover, unleashing a plasma bolt into the spraying fuel. A fireball engulfed Zorgax, the force hurling him back against the far wall with a sickening crunch. The warlord lay still, his armor smoking. "Go!" John yelled, half-dragging Wezin into the nearest shuttle. His fingers flew over the controls as blaster fire peppered the shuttle's hull. The hangar doors ground open, the rebel warship looming beyond, its weapons charging. With a teeth-rattling roar, the shuttle leaped forward, slicing out of the bay and banking hard away from the station. The warship's cannons flashed, lancing past them, but John wrenched the shuttle into a corkscrew dive towards the blue-white marble of Earth below. Wezin slumped in the co-pilot seat, one hand pressed to her side, eyes hard as she watched the receding station. They'll pursue us, she said flatly. We must reach your leaders. Warn them of the coming storm. John nodded, his mouth a grim line as the shuttle shuddered and bucked, flames wreathing its edges as it knifed through the atmosphere. The sprawling megalopolises of Earth rushed up to greet them, gleaming spires and seething masses of humanity. Teeth gritted with dedication, John aimed the shuddering craft towards the towering United Nations complex, ominous plumes of smoke billowing in their wake. The battle for Earth was only just beginning. The shuttle slammed into the concrete with a deafening screech of metal, skidding across the rain-slicked street. John's head snapped forward, vision blurring as alarms blared. He tasted copper, forcing his eyes to focus on the cracked view screen. The gleaming spires of New York loomed overhead, neon signs flickering through the smoke billowing from their craft. "Wazin?" John croaked, fumbling with his harness. The Empress stirred beside him, a low groan escaping her lips. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, mingling with the iridescent sheen of her scaled skin. Sirens wailed in the distance. John's pulse quickened. They couldn't afford to be found. He hauled Wezin from the wreckage, her lean frame surprisingly heavy, as he half-carried, half-dragged her into a nearby alley. The acrid stench of garbage assaulted his nostrils as he maneuvered through the narrow passage, keeping to the shadows. "Where are we going?" Wezin rasped, her antenna twitching weakly. "Somewhere safe," John muttered, scanning the grimy apartment buildings. His eyes locked onto a familiar fire escape. "Or as safe as we can get right now." Minutes later, John eased Wazin onto his threadbare couch, the springs creaking in protest. He winced at the state of his studio apartment, peeling wallpaper, dishes piled in the sink. Not exactly fit for an empress, but it would have to do. John rummaged through his med kit, hands steady as he cleaned and dressed Wazin's wounds. She watched him intently, her luminous eyes never leaving his face. "You have surprising skill for a maintenance worker," she observed. John's lips quirked in a humorless smile. Did a tour with the Earth Defense Force before taking the station gig. Picked up a few tricks. Wazin's antenna twitched, a gesture John was beginning to recognize as curiosity. "And yet you chose a life of, what did you call it? Turning wrenches?" "Seemed simpler," John shrugged, applying the last bandage. "Less complicated." A dry chuckle escaped Wazin's lips. "How did that work out for you?" Before John could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the building. He dove for the window, heart pounding, as he peered through the grime-streaked glass. 3 blocks away, their shuttle erupted in a fireball, illuminating the rain-soaked street. "Zorgax!" Wazin hissed, struggling to her feet. "He survived!" John's mind raced. They needed a plan, needed to move. But where? How? He turned to Wazin, seeing his own tenacity mirrored in her alien features. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The neon-drenched streets of New York stretched before them, a labyrinth of danger and possibility. Somewhere out there, Zorgax's assassins were closing in, and beyond that, a conspiracy that threatened both their worlds. John's fingers closed around the familiar weight of his blaster. "Well, Your Highness," he said, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Welcome to Earth. Things are about to get interesting." The neon-lit streets blurred as John and Wezin raced through the labyrinthine alleys of New York. Their unlikely alliance had caught the attention of an unexpected ally, Colonel Briggs of Earth's Special Operations Command. "This way," Briggs hissed, ushering them into a nondescript warehouse. Inside, a makeshift command center hummed with activity. Screens flickered with satellite imagery and intercepted communications. John's eyes widened as he took in the scene. "What is all this?" Briggs's face was grim. "We've been tracking Senator Blackwood for months. Your arrival just confirmed our worst fears. He's in bed with the Ferengi rebels." Wazin's antennae twitched. "Then we have a common enemy." "More than that," Briggs said, pulling up a holographic display. "We have a plan." The next hours were a whirlwind of preparation. John found himself strapping on body armor, checking weapon systems that made his old station blaster look like a child's toy. Wazin moved with fluid grace, integrating her own alien tech with the human arsenal. "Two-pronged assault," Briggs explained, gesturing to a 3D map of Blackwood's corporate headquarters. Freeman, you and the Empress lead the frontal attack. Draw their forces out. Keep them busy. My team slips in the back, extracts the data core with proof of Blackwood's treachery. John met Wazen's eyes, saw his own willpower mirrored there. No words were needed. The assault began under cover of darkness. John's blood sang as adrenaline coursed through him. He led the charge, years of military training flooding back. Plasma bolts sizzled past as Blackwood's mercenaries poured from the building. Wazen was a blur of motion beside him, her movements almost dance-like as she wove through the chaos. Her own weapons, a fusion of Ferengi and human tech, cut swathes through the enemy lines. "Push forward," John roared, diving behind a smoldering hovercar for cover. He popped up, squeezing off precise bursts that dropped 3 mercs in quick succession. Wazen slid in beside him, her scales glistening with sweat. "You fight well." "For a human," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. John grinned. "You're not so bad yourself, Your Highness." The battle raged on, a brutal dance of light and sound. John lost track of time, his world narrowing to the next target, the next piece of cover. He and Wazen moved in perfect sync, as if they'd fought side by side for years. A distant explosion rocked the building. John's comm crackled to life. "Data secured," Briggs's voice came through, terse and breathless. "Beginning exfil. We need cover." John nodded to Wazen. "Time to turn up the heat." They charged forward, unleashing a barrage that drove Blackwood's forces back into the building. John's muscles screamed as he vaulted over debris, closing the distance. A figure emerged from the smoke, Senator Blackwood himself, eyes wild with fury. He raised a wicked-looking weapon, aiming straight at Wazen. Time slowed. John saw the finger tightening on the trigger. Without hesitation, he hurled himself forward, shielding Wazen with his body. White-hot agony exploded through him as the blast connected. He heard Wazen's scream of rage, saw her lunging past him in a blur of motion. Then darkness swallowed him whole. John drifted in and out of consciousness. Snatches of conversation reached him through the haze of pain. "Our critical condition saved my life. Why would a human—" He forced his eyes open, blinking against harsh light. Wazen's face swam into focus above him, her features etched with concern. "You are perplexing," she said softly. "I've never known a human to show such selflessness." John tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. Wazen placed a cool hand on his forehead. "Rest," she said. "We have much to discuss when you are stronger." As John slipped back into unconsciousness, he caught a glimpse of conflict in Wazen's eyes. Something fundamental had shifted between them, born in the heat of battle and cemented by sacrifice. Whatever came next, nothing would be the same. John floated in a sea of darkness, pain radiating through every fiber of his being. Muffled voices drifted in and out of his consciousness, fragments of urgency and concern. Critical condition. Saved my life. Why would a human— He forced his eyes open, blinking against the harsh light. Wazen's face swam into focus, her features etched with worry. "You are perplexing," she said softly. "I've never known a human to show such selflessness." John tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. Wazen placed a cool hand on his forehead. "Rest," she said. "We have much to discuss when you are stronger." As John slipped back into unconsciousness, he caught a glimpse of conflict in Wazen's eyes. Something fundamental had shifted between them, born in the heat of battle and cemented by sacrifice. Hours blurred into days as John hovered between life and death. Wazen kept a constant vigil by his bedside, her luminous eyes never leaving his face. She pored over medical readouts, her antennae twitching with agitation as his vitals continued to decline. "There must be something more we can do," she hissed, frustration etched in every line of her alien features. Colonel Briggs shook his head grimly. "Our best medics are stumped. His injuries are beyond our current capabilities." Wazen's fingers clenched into fists. "Then we look beyond your capabilities." She strode to the window, staring out at the neon-drenched skyline of New York. Her mind raced, weighing impossible choices against unthinkable consequences. Finally, she turned back to Briggs, her eyes hard with dedication. "I need a secure comlink," she said, "and a fast ship." Hours later, Wazen's stolen shuttle streaked through the shadows of the outer solar system. She ignored the warning klaxons as she pushed the engines well past their limits. Time was a luxury John didn't have. The shuttle bucked and shuddered as she brought it in for a rough landing on a desolate asteroid. A camouflaged hatch ground open, revealing a state-of-the-art laboratory hidden within the rock. Dr. Xylox emerged, her scaled skin mottled with age, cybernetic implants glinting at her temples. "Empress," she said, her voice a low rasp, "to what do I owe this unexpected honor?" Wazen's words tumbled out in a rush, explaining John's condition, the desperate gamble she proposed. Xylox's eyes narrowed as she absorbed the implications. "What you're suggesting, it's never been attempted," she said. "The risks are incalculable, I know," Wazen interrupted. "But without it, he dies. Please." Xylox studied the Empress for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "Bring him to me." What followed was a blur of frantic activity. John's unconscious form was whisked into a sterile chamber. Banks of advanced medical equipment hummed to life. Xylox's team of renegade scientists swarmed around him, voices clipped and professional as they prepared for the unthinkable. Wazen watched from behind a force field, her heart pounding. As the procedure began, John's body convulsed violently. Alarm shrieked. For an agonizing moment, it seemed his human physiology would reject the alien genes. Then miraculously, his tremors subsided. The readout stabilized, showing a seamless integration of Ferengi and human DNA. John's eyes snapped open, blazing with an otherworldly intensity. He sat up, muscles rippling with newfound strength. His gaze locked onto Wazen, a mixture of confusion and wonder etched across his features. "What?" he began, his voice hoarse. "What did you do to me?" Wazen stepped forward, her own eyes wide with awe and a touch of fear at what she had wrought. "I saved you," she whispered. "But at what cost?" Before John could respond, an urgent message flashed across the lab's communication array. Zorgax had seized control of the Ferengi High Council, holding them hostage. His ultimatum was clear: Wazen must surrender herself, or watch her entire government be executed. John saw the conflict raging behind Wazen's eyes. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "You have to go," he said softly. Wazen nodded, her face a mask of persistence. "Find Briggs," she said. "Use the evidence. Stop Zorgax. Save both our peoples." Their eyes met, volumes of unspoken emotion passing between them. Then Wazen was gone, racing to face her destiny. John stood, marveling at the strength coursing through his altered body. He clenched his fist, feeling the raw power at his command. A grim smile tugged at his lips. "All right, Zorgax," he muttered. "Let's see what you make of me now."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.